You were the pawn, the piece, the plaything, not a player, not a threat, just something to be moved, used, discarded. You were placed on the board before you ever knew there was a game being played. The dice were already loaded. The rules were never made for you. You walked into rooms where people smiled with poison in their teeth. You gave trust like it was currency, only to find out they spent it behind your back. They whispered behind closed doors while pretending to clap when you walked in. They moved you like a chess piece, just far enough to keep you hoping, but never close enough to win. Tell me, ever feel like the whole world placed a bet on your failure? Like they didn't just expect you to fall, they needed you to. Because if you rose, if you made it, if you won, then everything they said about you, everything they believed about themselves, would shatter. They laughed while you broke. They watched like it was entertainment. To them, your life was sport, your pain, just background noise to their victory lap. But I'm not here to make it pretty, and I'm not here to play nice. I'm the voice that crawled out of that same pit you're in now. I know what it feels like to be the joke in someone else's punchline, to scream in silence, hoping someone might notice, and realizing they already did. They just didn't care. I know how it feels to be underestimated. So often you start shrinking yourself just to survive. To be called too emotional, too intense, too much. So you begin hiding your fire, watering yourself down into something they might find palatable. I know how it feels to trust people who swore they were different, only to watch them walk away when the mask fell off and your soul showed too much real. You gave them chances, you gave them patience, you gave them love like it was infinite, but they kept taking, kept twisting, kept pretending this was all some kind of game. And you kept hoping, kept forgiving, kept losing pieces of yourself with every round. But here's what they never saw coming. You were paying attention. Every fake smile recorded, every betrayal engraved, every time they clapped when you fell, etched into your bone. You were building something in the dark, something they can't manipulate, can't mock, can't stop. Because now it's your turn. The rules have changed. The board has flipped. And the piece they used to move without resistance, that piece just stood up. That piece just broke the game. They played you like a game, but now you're the final boss. And bosses don't ask for permission. They don't flinch. They command the room. They own the story. So if you're listening, not with your ears, but with your scar, then you already know this isn't just a speech. It's a warning to every person who thought you'd stay broken, to every hand that pushed you down and laughed when you stayed there, to every voice that said you weren't enough. You're not coming back to prove them wrong. You're coming back to remind them you were never theirs to define. This is your resurrection, not soft, not sweet, not polite. This time, you rise like a storm, and storms don't ask if the sky is ready. They just arrive. They wore masks better than kings wore crowns, perfectly polished personas, crafted with care, tested in the mirror, and sharpened like blades. Smiles so sincere they could have fooled the stars, but not anymore. Not you. Not now. You didn't see it at first. How could you? They moved like friends, spoke like family, held you like lovers. They clapped when you succeeded, but it wasn't joy in their eyes. It was calculation. They weren't applauding your rise. They were counting how long it would take for you to fall. They didn't just hurt you. No, that would have been too kind. They designed the pain, strategized it, plotted it, like a game of chess where you were always the checkmate. They told you they cared. They told you they'd stay. They told you they were different. And you believed them because you wanted to, because you saw the good in them. Even when they showed you the monster, you handed them the keys to your soul, thinking they'd protect it like treasure. But they used those keys to unlock your insecurities, to dig through your wounds, to find every hidden weakness and turn it into ammunition. They didn't need a weapon. You were the weapon, and they turned you against yourself. They called you crazy when your instincts screamed. They gaslit you until you questioned your own name. They played victim when you started catching on. And every time you pulled away, every time you hesitated, they pulled you back in with the same poisoned promises. It's not what you think. You're just overthinking. Don't be so sensitive. Each phrase, a leash. Each word, a chain. They fed off your guilt, your loyalty, your fear of abandonment, and they wore your suffering like a crown they didn't earn. The worst part? They didn't even see it as cruelty. To them, it was sport, a game of control, of domination, of power. You were their emotional sandbox, their experimental lab, their crash dummy for affection. They wanted to see how far they could push you, how many versions of yourself you'd kill just to keep their love alive. And when you broke, when the cracks began to show, when your eyes started to lose their shine, when your voice started to fade, they backed away, like spectators watching a fire they lit. They called you too much while demanding more. They accused you of being cold after freezing your soul in silence. They said you were the problem when all you ever wanted was the truth. But here's the truth they'll never say out loud. They were afraid of you, afraid of how deeply you felt, afraid of how purely you loved, afraid of the fire they could never replicate, so they tried to snuff it out. Not because you were weak, but because you were a mirror, and mirrors terrify those who can't face their reflection. They saw the warrior buried inside you, so they did everything to convince you it was a curse. But I need you to hear me clearly, without distortion, without the static of their lies. They weren't real. The love wasn't real. The loyalty wasn't real. The masks were. They didn't break you because you were fragile. They broke you because you were powerful. And now that the mask has cracked, now that you see the game for what it was, don't look away. Look harder. Look at the patterns. Look at the cycles. Look at the people you begged to treat you right. Look at how much of yourself you gave away, trying to earn what should have been given freely. You weren't naive. You were targeted. You weren't weak. You were chosen because you had something they didn't, and they couldn't stand the thought of you realizing it. But here you are, eyes open, heart armored, rage purified. Now you see them, not as gods, not as gurus, not as lovers, friends, mentors. You see them for what they really are, players in a rigged game. But that's the thing about players. They're only dangerous. But what they meant was, stay obedient. They told you not to burn bridges. But what they meant was, keep coming back to the pain we caused you. And through it all, you kept climbing. Every level harder than the last. Every betrayal deeper. Every lesson sharper. You learned to question your joy, because happiness always came with a catch. You learned to scan every smile, because love had become a mask. You learned that trust wasn't sacred, it was dangerous. But let's not pretend you didn't fight. You did. You loved harder. You held on longer. You believed deeper, even when it tore you apart. You gave people chances they didn't deserve. You saw red flags and painted them white. You begged for the bare minimum and called it grace, because somewhere deep down, you believed if you could be loyal, if you could be good, if you could be real, then maybe they would rise to meet you. But they didn't rise. They watched you climb and pulled the ladder when you got too high. They clapped when you suffered, because your pain confirmed their comfort. They betrayed you, not by accident, but by design. And that's the hardest truth of all. Not that people hurt you, but that they planned it, smiled through it, slept peacefully after it. And you stayed awake with the fragments, trying to solve puzzles that were never yours to fix, trying to understand motives that only made sense in broken hearts. So let me say this, with all the weight it deserves. Your pain is valid, not dramatic, not exaggerated, not too sensitive. Valid. You weren't wrong for trusting. You weren't weak for loving. You weren't foolish for hoping. You were human in a world that rewards masks. You are honest in a game that values manipulation. You are loyal in a system built to break the loyal. But now the game is exposed. Now the mask is off. Now you've seen what hides behind the handshake, the kiss, the praise. And this time, you're not walking blind. This time, you're not begging to belong. This time, you're the one drawing the line. Because every betrayal that tried to break you didn't bury you. It built you. They thought they were wounding you, but they were training you. They were sharpening the blade, and the blade is awake now. You're no longer walking through levels. You're rebuilding the world, brick by betrayal. Pain into power, silence into sound. And when you speak now, it won't be to ask for understanding. It'll be to remind them, you remember everything. You survived everything. You forgave yourself for everything they blamed you for. And now, you play by your own rules. You respawned with less each time until you stopped hoping. They called it failure, but it wasn't failure. It was death. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every unfulfilled promise, it was a death. Not of your body, not of your mind, but of your spirit. And each time, you got back up. You fought through the pain. And each time, you found less of yourself waiting on the other side. It wasn't just the scars they left behind. It wasn't the tears that stained your cheeks or the nights you spent questioning your worth. It was that piece of you, the one you didn't even realize was gone, until one day you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize who was staring back. The first time you fell, you got up stronger. The second time, you got up wiser. The third, you got up, but you didn't feel the same. By the fourth, the cracks started showing. And by the fifth, you didn't know if you had anything left to offer. You had dreams once, didn't you? Big, wild dreams that felt like they were a part of you. Dreams that lived in the spaces between your heartbeat, in the glow of your future. You could almost see them, taste them, feel them, and then they started to slip away. Not in a dramatic crash, not in some grand moment of devastation. No, it was quieter than that. The dreams just started to fade. Slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the ghost of what you wanted. They took your self-worth like it was theirs to borrow. They drained it, bit by bit, until you couldn't remember the last time you felt enough. They made you doubt yourself in ways you never thought possible. And now you can barely remember the person who thought she was worthy of the world. But here's the brutal truth. You didn't lose a battle. You lost pieces of yourself. Every time you gave a little more to them than you should have, you lost another part of your soul. Every time you excused their behavior, forgave their cruelty, overlooked their selfishness, you gave up a piece of your identity. And those pieces, they didn't just disappear. They were stolen. They said, "Don't be so dramatic," when you tried to tell them how much it hurt. They said, "Get over it," when you bled on their indifference. They said, "You'll be fine," when they ripped away the foundation of your dreams. And you kept going. You kept fighting. You kept hoping. Until one day, you realized you had nothing left to give. You realized that every time you tried to rebuild, you were using the same broken pieces of yourself, hoping they'd somehow fit together. But here's what they never understood. They didn't break you. They just wore you down. They wore you down until the fire that once burned inside you became a flicker, until your dreams turned into whispers in the dark, until you learned how to survive on the scraps of yourself they didn't take. But let me tell you something. Survival doesn't mean living. Survival is just going through the motion. It's breathing when you can barely remember how to live. Survival is waking up in the morning and forcing yourself to face a world that has forgotten how to see you. You didn't lose battles. You lost yourself. You lost your belief in something better. You lost your hope for more. You lost the confidence you once had, the light you once carried. You died 1,000 times, and each time you resurrected with less. But here's the thing they didn't teach you. You don't need to have it all back. You don't need to return to the person you were before. Because the truth is, that person, she's gone, she's dead, but she didn't die in vain. She died because she needed to make room for the person you're becoming. She died because you needed to understand something deeper than hope. You needed to understand that sometimes the life comes after the death. Sometimes it takes everything falling apart for something stronger to rise from the ashes. You are the phoenix. You are the warrior who has bled, fallen, died, and yet refuses to stay dead. And this time, you will rise with every piece of yourself intact. This time, when you resurrect, you will no longer be weak. This time, when you rise, you will be unstoppable. And when you look back on the person who once bled for others, you'll realize she was just the beginning. She was the warrior in training. She was the one who had to break to rebuild. But now, you are the final boss, and you won't be anyone's sacrifice ever again. They cheered for you while praying you'd fall on your face. You thought they were allies, saviors, supporters, soulmates, but they were shadows cloaked in smile, wolves dressed as warm hands. They clapped the loudest, not to celebrate you, but to drown out the sound of your instincts screaming, "This isn't right." It wasn't just the enemies who hurt you. It was the ones who claimed they loved you, the ones who hugged you while holding knives, the ones who fed you doubt wrapped in compliments. They didn't strike you head-on. They slid in sideways, weaving sabotage into soft words and subtle gestures. "I'm so proud of you," they said, but their eyes flinched when you shine. "You're really doing well," they smiled, but their silence roared when you needed them most. "Let me help," they whispered, only to plant seeds of self-doubt that bloomed into anxiety. You were gaslit until you didn't know which way was up, until you second-guessed every move, every word, every win. You found yourself apologizing for the light you didn't dim, for the strength you couldn't hide. You were told your confidence was arrogance, your ambition threatening, your boundaries rude. They made you feel like you were too much, too loud, too intense, too emotional. So you quieted your fire to make them comfortable. You diluted your power to make them feel big. And still it was never enough. They needed you broken, not because they hated you, but because your wholeness reminded them of everything they weren't. Your growth challenged their comfort. Your glow exposed their shadows. Your resilience was a mirror, and they hated the reflection. They disguised envy as advice. They called their criticism tough love. They told you to be realistic, when really they just didn't want you to leave them behind. They weren't guiding you. They were gripping you, trying to anchor you to the version of yourself that served their ego. And when you started to rise, that's when the real damage hit. They didn't scream at you to stop. No, screaming would be honest. They just slowly disappeared when you needed them. They went silent during your victory. They changed the subject when your name was praised. They forgot to show up when it mattered most. You weren't imagining it. You weren't too sensitive. They wanted you confused, because confusion is control. If you didn't know what was real, you'd keep chasing their approval like oxygen, and they'd stay in power without ever looking like the villain. But here's what you figured out. Loyalty without reciprocity is bondage. Support without sincerity is poison. And love that shrinks you isn't love at all. You don't owe anyone your destruction. Not your friends, not your family, not your partner, not your past. You don't have to keep bleeding for people who only feel full when you're empty. You don't have to set yourself on fire to light the path for people who would never do the same for you. They wanted you to doubt yourself because your doubt was their defense. Your insecurity was their comfort zone. Your hesitation meant they stayed ahead. But now the fog is clearing. Now you're seeing the game board clearly, and every fake ally is being exposed under the light of your clarity. You're not crazy. You're not difficult. You're not wrong for wanting more, needing more, demanding more. You were simply surrounded by people who couldn't handle the full expression of you. People who needed you dim to feel like they mattered. People who only clapped when you crawled. But you're not crawling anymore. You're rising. And their claps, their noise, their judgment, it no longer matters. Let them choke on the silence of your indifference. Let them drown in the distance of your evolution. Let them watch as the version of you they tried to contain becomes the version that breaks the world open. Because now you know, you don't need fake allies. You don't need validation wrapped in venom. You don't need applause that only comes when you're small. You've outgrown their games, and soon they'll realize you were never the pawn. You were never the weak one. You were the storm they thought they could tame. But storms don't beg. Storms don't apologize. Storms don't shrink. They destroy, and they rebuild, and they rise. It hits you like a cold breath down your spine. The realization that unravels everything. You were never meant to win. This wasn't just bad luck. It wasn't a couple of betrayals, a few wrong turns, a few broken hearts. No, this game, this life they handed you, it was rigged from the start. You weren't handed a clean slate. You were handed a loaded deck. And every time you stepped forward, they moved the goalposts. Every time you rose, they changed the rule. Every time you got close to something real, they pulled the floor out from beneath you. They wanted you broken. They needed you distracted because a focused version of you terrified them. So they programmed the game to drain your spirit. They filled the early levels with trauma, with pain you didn't choose, with battles you never asked for, with wounds you didn't understand. They made you question your worth before you even knew who you were. They placed mirrors around you, distorted, twisted, so you'd never see your power clearly. And every time you tried to rise above, they whispered in your ear, "You're selfish, you're crazy, you're not enough." And the worst part? You believed them, not because you were weak, but because when the entire system is built to make you doubt yourself, eventually, even the strongest start to crack. They gave others a head start, while you carried a backpack full of trauma, of expectations you didn't sign up for, of generational burdens you couldn't name but felt anyway. You fought battles in silence, while others coasted in comfort. You were surviving storms while they played in the sun, and no one asked if you were okay. No one handed you the cheat codes. No one told you how to fix yourself. They just expected you to play nice and keep losing with a smile. And when you tried to speak, they called you bitter. They said you were too negative, too intense, too emotional. They made your pain a problem instead of a symptom. You were climbing mountains with broken legs, and they had the audacity to judge your pace. They had the nerve to mock your struggle, as if the weight you carried wasn't 10 times heavier than theirs. That's when it all comes crashing down. The lie you've been fed since birth, that if you just work harder, love deeper, forgive faster, you'll win. But what if the game was never designed for you to win? What if the system was built to break you? Not because you're worthless, but because your worth is the threat. Because the moment you realize what you are, what you've always been beneath the rubble, you become unstoppable. So they fed you distraction, false allies, false hopes, false futures. They told you to wait your turn, to stay small, to be patient, to be grateful for crumbs, while they feasted off your silence. And now you see it. Now the lie is clear. You were never meant to win, because they knew what would happen if you did. They knew the moment you saw through the game, you'd stop playing by their rule. You'd stop begging for seats at tables that were never built for you. You'd stop apologizing for surviving a world that tried to break you at every turn. This is the low point. This is the silence before the scream. This is where the ashes settle, and all that's left is the truth. You were never meant to win, but that doesn't mean you can't, because here's the twist they never saw coming. You're not here to win their game. You're here to burn it down, to rewrite the rule, to tear apart the rigged board and build your own arena, where you're not the pawn. You're the force that ends the game. This is the end of Act 1, and the beginning of something they can't control. Because now you know. And once you know, you can never be played again. No more mirrors warped by their lies. No more edits, no more filters, no more fog. Just you, raw, unfiltered, undefeated. There comes a moment, sharp, breathless, where you stop running. Not because you're tired, but because something deep inside you whispers, turn around, and you do. And for the first time, you look at yourself, not through their eyes, not through the lenses they forced on you, not through guilt, shame, or the need to be accepted. You look through yours. It's not pretty. It's not polished. This version of you isn't smiling for anyone. They're not dressed for approval. They're not wearing the mask. They're just you. And for a moment, you don't recognize the reflection, because for so long, you only saw yourself through distortion. You thought you were weak because they needed you to feel weak. You thought you were crazy because they couldn't handle your clarity. You thought you were too much because your full power terrified people who lived half-lives. But now you're seeing it. The bones beneath the bruises, the fire beneath the ashes, the soul that never gave up, even when you begged it to. This is the mirror stage. This is when the illusion collapses. This is when you finally see the difference between who you were told to be and who you are. You see the fight, the silent battle, the 1,000 deaths you died just to keep breathing. You see how you held it together when everything begged you to fall apart. You see how the world underestimated you because you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to stand out. You were meant to be the glitch in their system, the variable they couldn't control. And you start to reclaim not just your identity, but your narrative, your name, your story. You're not the broken one. You're the rebuilt one, stronger in the shattered places, sharper in the wound, more dangerous than you've ever been, because now you're aware, and awareness is power. You begin to unlearn the lies that your emotions made you weak, that your ambition made you selfish, that your silence made you obedient. Number your emotions made you human, your ambition made you alive, and your silence. That was just the calm before the storm. You start to say no, louder. You start to say yes to yourself. You stop explaining your worth. You stop begging to be chosen. You realize that everything you needed, you already had. Buried under years of noise, suffocated by the weight of expectations, but still there, still alive. This is the awakening. You were never too much. They were too little to handle you. You were never invisible. They just refused to see. You were never lost. You were becoming. And now that the mirror is clean, now that the image is real, you finally meet the warrior that's been waiting to be unleashed. You. Not the version they could manipulate, not the version they could silence, but the version that remembers, the version that is rising, the version that will never again doubt her reflection. Because the mirror doesn't lie anymore. And the person staring back, she's not here to play the game. She's here to end it. Take a deep breath. Now look down, not with shame, but with reverence. Because what you're about to see isn't damage. It's evidence, proof you lived, proof you fought. Every scar on your heart, your mind, your soul. Those aren't signs of weakness. They are not stains. They are symbols, marks of the war you didn't choose but survived anyway. Each scar, a line in the story they tried to erase. The one on your back? That's from when they betrayed you, when someone you trusted drove the knife in slow smiling while they twisted. You didn't see it coming, but now you know to never turn your back on false love again. The one on your chest? That's from heartbreak, the kind that doesn't make a sound when it shatters. The kind that cracks you in silence while the world keeps spinning like nothing happened. But look at you now. Your heart may be stitched together with scars, but it still beats. And it beats louder now. The one on your throat? That's from silence, when you swallowed screams just to keep the peace. When you bit your tongue until it bled because speaking your truth felt dangerous. But not anymore. Your voice is a weapon now, and it's coming back stronger than ever. And those invisible scars, the ones no one else sees, the ones you carry quietly through the day and bury deep at night, they're real too. From the moments you almost broke, but didn't. From the nights you laid in bed, eyes open, heart heavy, fighting battles in your mind just to make it to morning. No one saw those wars, but you did, and you won. This is your inventory of scars, a sacred archive. Each mark a map of your resilience,